This is a very special show for you today because I've not just got one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 Omega Speedmasters dating from 1963 to 2021 to show to you. This is the MWC BQ Watches Takeover. Thank you so much to Spencer at BQ Watches for sending me a brand new 2021 Moon Watch. They are the best store for used premium designer watches, your local dealer worldwide. Also, don't forget to check out That Watch Guy London, because without that show and the help of Gavin, I wouldn't have this amazing content to give to you today. Check them out on the YouTubes. They have arguably the best watch live stream on the platform. I've also got to say a big thank you to the anonymous watch collector that Gavin knows that has sent me some amazing vintage Speedies. I'm a huge space nut. I know all about the Gemini and Apollo missions from NASA back in the 60s. One day I do hope to own a Speedmaster Professional in my watch collection. Will this show today seal the deal? Okay, so here a little glimpse of the watches I've got to show you today. And it's just making me excited just looking at it, you know what I mean? As I said in the intro, we have a reference that dates back to 1963 all the way up to 2021. Now, before I get a little hands-on review and show you these watches,
let me contextualize
the life of the Speedmaster. Okay, we have to go back to 1957 when the first Speedmaster was released. It had a tachymeter bezel on it, therefore this was marketed as a sports car racing chronograph. And here's the first reference, the CK2915. As you can see, it does sort of resemble the Speedmasters we know today, but we have a stainless steel bezel, and look at those broad arrow hands. Oh, that's nice. It already has the beautifully balanced triple sub-dial formation, and it has the equally beautiful caliber 321. Now, this movement actually came out in 1946 and is what is recognised by many as the best manual wind column wheel chronograph out there on the planet. And it was used by brands such as Breguet, Patek Philippe, and Vacheron Constantin. And even back in 46, this movement had added protection from anti-magnetic fields and shocks,
which will prove useful in a NASA test 20 years from now.
Anyway, in 1958, a new reference of the Speedmaster came out, the CK2998, and now we have a black aluminium tachymeter bezel, and we're starting to see the Speedmaster we know. Roll on to 1963, and here we have the ST105-003, otherwise known as the Ed White Speedy, because it was on the wrist of astronaut Ed White. He was the first American to do a spacewalk, and as you can see here, he had this Speedmaster on his wrist. So what we have here is a 50-odd-year-old watch. Absolutely amazing. This reference still isn't quite like the Speedmasters we know of today. This is what they call the symmetrical case. We also have straight lugs, and this watch is only 40mm in diameter. Most of the 105-003s have very wobbly loom, like this one, but in my eyes, it's aged beautifully. We have a step dial, which was first introduced in this reference, and the reference before that had what they call alpha hands. These now have the baton hands we know and love today. Turn the watch around, and we have that hugely iconic hippocampus. Yes, the beast that pulled the chariot for Neptune or Poseidon.
Greek mythology for you.
Protected by a Hesselite crystal, and is absolutely beautiful. Funny story with this, Omega didn't actually realise that NASA chose their Speedmaster for the actual space flights. It was only when they realised Ed White had the watch on in space in a photograph. Now, the Speedmaster was the only watch that passed every single test NASA threw at them. And in 1964, the Omega Speedmaster was the official watch used for the Gemini and Apollo missions. After Omega had found out about this, the next reference had professional under the word Speedmaster. As you can see on this Ed White reference, we do not have a top pusher, so we can't engage that chronograph, but it does not take away the sheer beauty of this watch. And here we come to the 105-012, the most recognised and iconic Speedmaster of all time, because this reference was on the wrist of Buzz Aldrin. He was the second man on the moon, don't you know? This is where we get the first asymmetrical Speedmaster. Omega, always looking to improve their watches, decided that the pushers and crown were very vulnerable to breaking off the movement. So they added extra protection to those pushers and crown, and this design and case shape has been kept the same for well over 40 years. Now, like the 003, this 012 still has the 3-2-1 movement, but the case is different. The lugs are no longer straight. They are what is known as Lyra lugs. And in actual fact, there were two companies manufacturing the cases for Omega, Huguenin Frères and Centrale Boîte.
I butchered that, haven't I?
In the CB cases, the lugs have a more pronounced straight line facet to them than the usual twisted lugs. This to me looks like an HF case, but I could be wrong. What's also different with the 105-012 is those big fat chronograph pushers and also the screw down case back, still with the hippocampus, but has a double beveling. All of these watches are fantastic dials, it has to be said. Here's another 105-012, an absolutely stunningly looking dial, tremendous fat pushers and crown, but it's an absolute pleasure and joy to show you these watches. The Ed White 003 started manufacturing in 63, but they didn't stop making them until the end of 68. The Buzz Aldrin 012 came out in 66, and they finished production in 68 also. In 68, Omega gave us the ST145.012, otherwise known as the Michael Collins. He was the poor fella that had to circumnavigate the moon while the other two astronauts were jollying it up, being the first men on the moon.
What a lonely bugger.
Here the watch hasn't changed too much from the ST105-012. Same case, we do have slightly thinner pushers, so the Speedmasters with the 3-2-1 movement in them stopped production in 1969. And from then on, Omega introduced this watch with the 8-6-1 movement. Easier to service,
but not as pretty.
also not as iconic. Right, so I didn't go too much into detail with the bracelets and the straps with these older watches. Who knows if they're original, but thanks to BQ Watches, I've got a brand new, up-to-date Speedmaster Moonwatch Professional to show off and compare with these other beauties. So this is the 311-304230, and this watch is based on the Mark IV Speedmaster, the Buzz Aldrin, but instead of the iconic 3-2-1 movement, it's another iconic Omega movement, the coaxial, which is a type of watch escapement mechanism which avoids the sliding friction of a lever escapement, thereby making it much more robust. This watch is slightly bigger than the Ed White at 42mm in diameter. Also, because of the movement, this watch is slightly thicker, and because of this beautifully brushed and solid new bracelet, the watch is significantly heavier. We don't have a step dial like all of the 3-2-1 references. It's more of a dome dial, same baton handset, and look at the case back. It's now this medallion style, flight qualified by NASA for all manned space missions. That is superb. The first watch worn on the moon.
Top kudos, isn't it?
I do get a warm fuzzy feeling when I see a vintage watch with natural patina and age. But each of these watches has an individual story to tell. Through the decades, they've been on different wrists and been a part of many people's lives. That absolutely fascinates me, and it's definitely one of the appeals of having a vintage watch like this. I should have no attachment whatsoever to Omega or NASA, but for some strange reason, I do feel a connection there. Maybe it's the amount of space stuff I read and I saw on the telly back when I was a kid. Owning pieces of history like this could be the pinnacle of watch collecting for me. Super! So there we go, 5 Speedmasters, all on one show. It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's been an absolute privilege to actually hold history in my hands. These tool watches back in the 60s were vital for astronauts, as they were a backup in case communication had been lost lost from mission control. The watches had to be reliable in all sorts of temperatures, and to own any Speedmaster from the 60s to the nowsies, it has to be a watch that is on every watch collector's radar. I see the Omega Speedmaster as probably the most important watch in the history of modern day watchmaking, and you have to give Omega huge credit for not changing this Speedmaster look too much. I mean, we can sort of forget about the 70s ones, can't we? It's quite nice, that, actually. Has it made me want to buy an Omega Speedmaster even more? Yes. I may just keep Spencer's one
And see if he notices it's gone.
From me, the Mad Watch Collector, I'll see you in a tick, 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 a tick.
Every little second, every hour, every minute